On a hot summer day, as the sun shone down fiercely, my family, community, and I gathered on the front lawn of the former Burdell Residential School, where my grandparents, Mildred and Donald Bunn, were forcibly taken many years prior. I, like many Indigenous people at the time, was processing the news of the 215 unmarked graves at the former Kamloops Residential School. I remember the day that I heard the news. My heart sank. The stories of children not returning home from residential schools are the stories that my grandparents shared. They're the stories that residential school survivors have been sharing for generations, and they are the truths that for so long have been ignored. While the news of the 215 shocked the world, it also caused many Indigenous peoples and survivors to relive their own trauma and their own hurt. During that time, I began thinking and reflecting on the way in which this ongoing trauma and hurt affected my own community, Bertel Sioux, Dakota Nation. I felt a deep desire in my heart to create a space for healing and reflection and to find a way to honor residential school survivors in my community and all across Canada. During that time, I began reflecting on the words that my grandfather had once shared with my family and I. He once said that when he was a student at the Burdell Residential School, he wanted nothing more than to just run away and go home. Upon reflecting on his words, I began thinking to myself, what if I went back to the former Burdell Residential School and walked and ran home, not only in honor of my grandfather Donald, but all survivors in my community and across Turtle Island? The idea quickly grew into action, and the idea soon came to fruition. On July 1st, 2021, over 75 people from my community and surrounding communities gathered on the front lawn of the former Burdell Residential School. I remember the day vividly. As I stepped onto the front lawn, I was overtaken by a sea of orange. People from my community intermingled with strangers that I had never seen before. The morning began with an elder and survivor from my community, Terry Westachet, sharing his story. Elder Terry spoke with pain in his voice as he recounted his experience as a student at the Burdell Residential School. He referenced the building as he spoke, and he said, when I was a young boy, I tried to run away from this place. I knew that if I cut down here and ran past the river, that I would make it home. Although Elder Terry shared his story with pain in his voice, he also spoke with hope and strength as he spoke towards his vision for reconciliation in this country. Before all the participants made the journey home that day, he led us in a pipe ceremony. The moment was powerful. I remember tears falling down my cheeks as I witnessed a residential school survivor stand on the front lawn of the very institution that tried to eradicate our language, our culture, our identity, and our people. And his resilience standing there that day was a symbol that despite the hurt caused by the residential school system and its ongoing impacts, the ultimate goal failed. And there he was that day, standing there, living proof, speaking our language, practicing our culture, and standing strong in his identity before all of our people. As we began the 25-kilometer journey home that day, I hadn't realized that it was the first time that many survivors in my community had been back to the former Burdell Residential School and were able to walk away on their own terms, since they were forcibly taken there as children. Many survivors could not make the full 25-kilometer journey home, so they walked as far as they could and caught rides along the way. Once we made it back to my community of Bertel Sioux, Dakota Nation, we had a time of feast and sharing for survivors in my community. And again, it was the first time that many of them were sharing their truths publicly for the first time. They spoke courageously, and everyone listened. And in that moment, I knew that the healing that had begun had to continue. As the day began to wind down, I ended up speaking with a participant who had actually ran the last portion of the walk that day. He had shared with me that the distance that we had walked of creating an annual event began to take shape. The Healing Walk of July 1st, 2021 grew into what is now known as the Reconciliation Run, Canada's first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation half marathon. The Reconciliation Run begins in the same way as the Healing Walk did, with an elder and survivor sharing their story, performing a pipe ceremony before participants run and walk home to my community of Bertel Sioux Dakota Nation for a time of sharing and a feast. To date, the Reconciliation Run has united hundreds of participants from all across Turtle Island in honor of the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, to learn, to reflect, and to heal. The Reconciliation Run has become a powerful tribute not only to my grandfather Donald's words of wanting nothing more than to run away and go home, but it's also a reminder that movement and healing can keep us balanced physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, because movement is medicine, and the Reconciliation Run serves to honor all residential school survivors and those who never made it home. While each year the Reconciliation Run brings together a diverse group of participants, in the weeks leading up to the run, I often receive inquiries from non-Indigenous individuals asking if it's okay if they participate. My response has always been the same. Truth and reconciliation involve all of us, so they are not only welcome to join, but they are encouraged to do so. Prior to the first Reconciliation Run in 2022, I received an email from a woman who told me that she was non-Indigenous and that she'd be traveling from British Columbia to attend the run. She asked and double-checked and said, "Is it okay if I come?" I remember saying to her and giving her the same response that I had given others, and I said, "Of course, you're more than welcome to join." On the morning of September 30th, 2022, as the sun was still rising over the former Bertel Residential School and there was still dew on the ground as participants began to gather for the first ever Reconciliation Run, a woman approached me. She introduced herself, and I shook her hand as I introduced myself. And I thanked her for coming and making the long journey from British Columbia for the run. I did not see that woman again until she crossed the finish line. Each year since the Reconciliation Run had began, I stand at the finish line and welcome participants home to Bertel Sioux Dakota Nation, placing a finisher medal around their neck and giving them a hug. As the woman crossed the finish line that day, she was crying profusely. And this isn't something that's uncommon, as many participants are often overtaken with emotion and reflection before, during, and after the run. I placed a medal around her neck, and I gave her a hug as she continued to sob. She then asked me, "Can I speak to you in private for a moment?" She pulled me to the side, and in what felt like minutes, but was really seconds, she said, "I want to tell you the real reason why I came here today." She broke the silence and said, "My grandfather and your grandfather can be placed in the Bertel Residential School at the same time." As those words left her mouth, I remember my heart just pounding. I was thinking to myself, this is the same woman who told me that she was non-Indigenous. How could this possibly be? The woman then spoke again and said, "The real reason I came here today is because my grandfather actually worked at the Bertel Residential School." As those words left her mouth, chills ran down my spine, and a tear fell from my face, and she stared at me waiting for my reaction. I was still at a loss for words when she said, "I believe that truth must come before reconciliation, and I am here today to own my family's truth." At this point, I was in full tears, and I gave her a hug, and we began to cry together. At the end of the Reconciliation Run each year, we continue to have a feast and a time of sharing for survivors. All survivors get up and share their story so courageously, and after many survivors had shared, the woman approached me and asked me if she could speak for a moment. I double-checked and ensured that no other survivors wanted to share before I handed her the microphone. I remember thinking, what is she going to say? And the first words out of the woman's mouth were, "I am sorry." The woman shared her story. She shared what had brought her to the run that day, and she apologized for the role that her grandfather and her family had in the role of the residential school system. She apologized for the actions and the hurts that her grandfather had caused. I remember looking around the room as survivors were in tears, and almost everyone else in the room was in tears as well. After the woman had concluded, she shared again, "I believe that truth must come before reconciliation." As she finished her speech that day, survivors stood up and gave her a hug, and they thanked her for coming and sharing her family's truth. Because in that moment, she took the weight off of their shoulders of sharing their truth. And she shared truth from what can be called the other side. As I spoke with the woman more in depth about her story, she shared with me how shocked and how ashamed she felt when she discovered that her grandfather had worked at the Birtle Residential School. But despite that, she showed up and she owned her family's truth. So while not everyone will have a story like this woman, the reality is that the residential school system is all of our history. The ongoing impacts is all of our truths. If truth and reconciliation is a journey, then we all must spend the rest of our lives running toward truth and reconciliation. Thank you.